edition of Office Hours with. As always, I'm joined by Scott Elchison. Scott, hello. Yes, happy Thursday coming at you from a new day this time. And with us this week, we've got Ian and Zack from the Consumer Engagement Company. Thank you guys both for being here.
Thank you. Thanks, Ryan.
So we always like to kick this off with a very casual softball question to lob out at you guys. Why don't you just tell us what is Thece, or the Consumer Engagement Company? How'd you get your start, and what are you guys building?
Yes. So I would say
the risk factor. So what we wanted to do with this was aggregate influencers, so we had a reliable and steady pool and flow of impressions, and serve ads in a media standardized format to make it easier for media houses, shops, agencies to buy us without massive risk, and to make it fit into what's already being done in the marketplace. Did I miss anything, Zack?
No, I think it's mainly about pooling the influencers and teams into a greater audience size, so that you're not taking all risk every time you make a bet into the space. So if you are looking to get into the esports and gaming space through a sponsorship model, you're kind of all risk and limited reward, because if that influencer, that team, etc., goes away tomorrow or does something silly that you're not going to be proud of as a brand, you don't really have the ability to shift into new spaces in a very seamless way. And so, I think the real secret is that we pooled this inventory and started to classify it by genre. And ultimately we'll get to different levels of targeting, but right now as we take it to market, you can get into your fantasy games, or you can get into your sports titles, and a lot of those align with a lot of brands, and so it's really about being able to place this inventory quickly into the carousel across a swath of influencers, as opposed to just saying, I'm going to go for Scott. because Scott's the right guy.
Yep, absolutely.
So I think, because I can't actually see the broadcast, but I believe the ad unit is spinning in our broadcast right now on the Twitch stream.
It is indeed. So everybody, if you're on LinkedIn, you're on Twitter, I would say pop over to the Twitch stream because the ad unit is live. It is playing, and it is fantastic. But pretend as though that you can see it. Do you want to kind of like describe it for all of the viewers and really kind of how this ad unit works and what it does?
So Ian, do you want to take this one or do you want me to?
Oh, go for it.
All right. So if you're seeing the Twitch unit, or you're watching us on Twitch right now, you'll see there's a carousel inside the broadcast. Well, that carousel, we have the ability to manage that carousel across about 100,000 influencers right now. And that is generating anywhere from, let's say, 800 million to 1 billion weekly impressions. Now, it kind of depends on the time of year you're at, what other events are going on, but that's approximately what we have right now. And what we're able to do is directly inject ad creative into that carousel. Now, this has been something that influencers have been able to do for quite some time. And so what's, again, interesting that what we've done, A, is the pooling, so that we have access to, like I said, 100,000, not one. And then number two is we've been working breakneck speed over the last couple of months to start putting reporting in. Because we know that in the brand spend space, it's not about what I say, it's about what I can read, right? It's not about saying, oh, I had 100,000 people show up. It's actually show me that proof that 100,000 people showed up and how many of them are unique. And so that's the other thing too, is that now it's not just a, hey, trust me, there was a lot of people that came and watched my feed. Well, it's actually, no, we can tell you how many impressions, how many times the carousel spun, how many people were on when the carousel was spinning, and we can even look at what the uniques were against that. And so that's sort of, I would say, the macro picture of the unit. Right now, you can come in with a static image. So if all you wanted to do, and what's spinning right now in there is a couple of different ad creatives that we put in. So a static image is the most basic. You need to send us a PNG or a JPEG. It needs to be a square image. If you want to use bang tags, you're welcome to use bang tags. And then, that will hold for 15 seconds in the carousel. The next level up, and this is what we have with a couple of the units that are spinning in the carousel, are animated GIFs. So this is your ability to put in a call to action, your ability to talk a little bit about your product. You can even put in a video, like, put in 15, 20 seconds of pre-roll. But again, it has to be a GIF. And then the third, and this is where the Thece core omnichannel platform comes in, is moving off to the second screen via QR code. So again, This is a GIF. This is a 30-second cap, so you only get 30 seconds. And what we're also doing, through our testing is looking at what's the ideal mixture of message and QR hold. We've run it with about 15 seconds of message, with 15 seconds of QR hold. We've run it with 20 seconds of message with a 10-second QR hold. But definitely less than 10 seconds is not worth your time of throwing a QR code out.
Okay.
And the other thing, too, that we've noticed with the QR code and the messaging is that it's not the first time you see it that you scan. Almost never, right? It's when it shows up the third time, the fourth time. And we're starting to see companies and also broadcasters embed QR codes into their sort of television experiences. I mean, I'm also into professional, traditional sports, and I was glad to see that the U.S. Open decided to put a QR code in. But they did it once a broadcast, and it was never at a regular time. And, it was impossible for me to actually find my phone, grab my phone, and get the QR code up. And I actually had to go search for it because I'm in the QR business to figure out what it pointed to. So, that's kind of a long, detailed description of what is spinning in the carousel right now. When you come in and buy as an advertiser, you basically tell us, what's the genre you want to go against.
Yep.
You tell us how many impressions you want, and then you tell us how long you want to run that campaign. And that's the buy.
Mm-hmm. And so I am curious about the like the ad unit itself. So can it live anywhere within the streamer's viewport? Is there like a certain part of the stream that is like required for them to actually put the square so it's visible? Like how are you working with that pool of talent essentially to make sure that these the ad unit is placed visible in a kind of like consistent area?
I love that question because that's often the first question is about standardization, right?
Yep.
And at the moment, with such a broad swath, and at the very beginning of this, what we're standardizing is size. We're not standardizing placement because if you're doing a just chatting moment and you're sitting in your apartment and you're with cats, maybe it's upper right.
Right.
If you're playing a strategy game and everything's taking place in the upper deck right here, you got to put it down in the bottom. If you're playing in a first-person shooter game, you probably need to put it along your Chiron. So, at this early stage, we have a hard time, thinking about placement on the screen, but we do need it to be big enough so that I can scan it. Some of our really early testing we were doing with in-house ads, we didn't standardize size. And honestly, when I was trying to watch some of the VODs, I would put my camera literally like up to the almost
touching the screen.
It was like an RFID code, right? It wasn't even like a QR. So that those are the lessons learned. And as we take this out again, we're going to figure out what's the ideal mixture of message to call to action. We're going to figure out what's the ideal placement. We're going to figure out what's the ideal size. And really we want to find the most innovative brands that are willing to start this journey with us.
Yeah, and I am interested. We kind of talked about brands, so obviously the native company is the consumer engagement company. So what are the kind of goals or KPIs that you are seeing this ad unit solve for very well? I have to imagine they're around engagements.
Yeah, so I'll jump on that one. So you see the Oreo creative that's running, and for those that are seeing it on the carousel, just do open it up and play, because it gives you an idea of just one idea we made for their micro game, which worked terrifically. Now that KPI, just so you know, was time spent with the cookie, because if you spend time with Oreos, you want more Oreos, right? And they were really tired of the DDR problem. That was part of their initial brief, was like, we're sick to death of being skipped. So we want people to opt in and play and spend time with our cookie, and then they'll buy more. So can you get us 30 seconds? And we said, yeah, sure, we'll try for 30 seconds, and they averaged 65. So that's a classic KPI. We've seen other things where we've wanted to forward people to directly to a video link or a trailer. We've seen people want to do product selection. So we had a cachaça brand that was new to our markets in the States and wanted to show people that it wasn't just for caipirinhas. You could make all sorts of things. You could do classical, you could do ice, crushed ice, salt rimmed, all these kind of different things. And so you went through a fun little game, 4 or 5 questions, and it gave you a recipe to use the brand. So lots and lots and lots of different options available. Some straight to an app where you buy a product. If you're snacking, for instance, if you're thinking about something like that, and you're on a stream for 5 hours and you're starving, the KPI could be take you directly to Grubhub, Uber Eats, whichever one, right?
So for that second screen experience, are there really any limitations as to what a brand can do, or is it pretty much totally bespoke and you guys work with them to tailor the experience based on their KPIs and specifically what goals they're hoping to achieve with the campaign?
You want me to take that one?
Yeah, you go for it, because operationally there's a few restrictions, but not many. I mean, we've seen, I'd just say off the bat, we've seen all sorts of different things. We've managed to achieve different angles, and lots of clever people in the advertising industry have lots of clever ideas about how they could use it. But Zack, operationally?
Yeah, I mean, so it starts with the QR code, and one of the things that we have to recognize is that when we're working in live stream, we're creating evergreen content, right? And so not only does that QR code spin in the carousel in real time, but it also turns into a VOD and then can live in YouTube I don't know, in perpetuity, theoretically. And so one of the things that we've noticed with a lot of the prevalence of QRs is that sometimes they go stale, and you essentially have a broken link on packaging that's sitting out there. And so if you think about your video that's sitting out there as packaging, you need to be able to manage that QR. So that's one of the things that we've really focused on our platform, is to be able to manage that QR. So that's number one. Like if you go look at my LinkedIn account, I have a QR code as part of my LinkedIn profile, and it points to a certain URL. We've changed that, I don't know, 50 times over the last 6 months. Mm-hmm. We changed it 3 times this week because we released some new features into the platform. But the audience doesn't know, right? Because we're managing where that asset is pointing to.
Right.
So, from that perspective, then once you bounce from the QR, what do you want to do with the audience next? And so we have our own platform that is about question and answer, because that's where we see the highest level of participation and engagement.
Okay.
And what that KPI that the brand wants to drive to is really dependent on the type of company it is. So, a QSR is really about transactions, right? Like, I want people to order directly from my app right now. So, you drive towards that. Whereas, maybe a consumer product is more about taste testing. And it's about, hey, send me this new power bar that I've never heard of before because I want to try it, because I don't like the flavors that are out there, stuff like that. And then, take it to some more of the technology things. It might be about lead generation, bigger, higher value purchases that have a bigger customer, purchase points, not maybe transactional. Maybe it's more about relational.
Right.
So, we accommodate for all of that. And we've also opened up our platform for, let's say a creative already has a third-party web app that they've developed. So as long as you keep it within the confines of the open web, we can accommodate for it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's super interesting. To me, I also look at it kind of for commerce in a way, right? You can kind of trigger commerce out, because Twitch has their blacksmith product. That's really focused on driving people from a Twitch stream into Amazon for a purchase funnel. But to your point, QR code, you can drive it to anywhere. So it could be an interesting way for a brand that isn't, necessarily selling on Amazon today, as a way to kind of trigger that first step in the commerce process to their website or their checkout cart or whatever it might be, which I think is super interesting, because, there are some brands that love to be on Twitch and don't necessarily advertise or have product on Amazon.
Yeah, and I think, from that perspective too, is there's also brands that are kind of novel. Not everybody, they're not, I would say, swappable brands. Like toothpaste is somewhat swappable, right?
Right.
But then there's products out there that are really niche, and I'm not ready to buy it until I know more about it. Mm-hmm. And so I think that's also where our platform really, it really shines, is because no better way today to get somebody to understand something than through the Socratic method of learning.
Right.
Because don't tell me, ask me, right? Because if I tell you, look, we live in this information age where things are coming at us 1 billion miles a minute, and it just goes, wow. But if I ask you, what color of shirt do you want to wear today? Well, you're automatically thinking about shirts and about color.
Right. Yeah, it's I would say we this afternoon we literally just recorded a podcast on technology's impact on mental health and the idea of this information overload, and so I think one of the takeaways is the more concise the message can be, kind of help guide the consumer into the destination of where they want it to be, is super important, because to your point, it is this information. It's just the idea of standing out in a wave, all the clutter. The clutter is here 10,000 fold in 2020.
So
I think just to add to the point there is that our average engagement length when people start is percentage is over 50%. So I think that's an interesting fact. So if you see people click and bounce, that's one thing. But if you see people go to a game, they've bothered to pull the phone out, snap the QR, and tap the link, and then 58% of that Oreo campaign finished. That's huge.
That's
so you actually
good.
Yeah. So and that's average for us. 45 to 55% is typical completion rate once they get there.
Mm-hmm.
So I noticed in the carousel you guys have 1 billion impressions available. How exactly are you aggregating that inventory? Are you reaching out to the influencers directly? Are you working with an OBS partner? What's your method?
Yeah, so we have an OBS technology partner, and they have built the software that manages and aggregates the influencers. They have a novel approach to how they do that I don't think they would like me sharing, so I will not. And it actually, their novel approach is why we decided to work with them, because what it does is it creates 2 layers of brand safety. And so what's funny is, Scott, you mentioned at the beginning around sort of the parameters of the ad units, and then, you asked me a question. Well, the number 2 question we always get in a conversation is, okay, so how is this going to be brand safe? Right?
Oh, that was on our list. I'm glad you beat me to it.
I mean, Ian and I have been out to market only about, so also I'd like to say one of the interesting things is this is really sort of our public unveiling of this product. So we really appreciate you guys, jumping on and bringing us in. We've really only been out to market for about 2 weeks with this.
Right.
And so I think it's also a testament of how on the cutting edge you guys are, and I also think this is awesome. You guys are doing it in a new way on Twitch and stuff. But the brand safety portion of this is really important to us because, and this is why we work with these partners, because they've thought about all this, right? And they put parameters in place, and there's peer pressure mechanisms to promote brand safety, and then there's technology solutions to promote brand safety. And so, I'd say that's how we not only capture the inventory, but it's also how we manage the inventory to make sure that we're not putting Oreo in front of bad actors.
Right. Yeah, it's definitely a conversation that is becoming more and more of the forefront when it comes to how especially here at how our teams are buying. Definitely looking at brand safety as an entire landscape. We're kind of looking at there's brand safe content, and obviously there's the brand sensitivity content, and then kind of finding that distinction between the two. But I'm glad the team has already looking deeply into that, because that is just, I think, nowadays in the media world, is kind of a new standard of how advertisers are going to be pursuing their media buys.
Yeah, it's super important for everyone in brand safety, and as you say, holistically, everyone has to be brand safe. And I've spoken to several agencies about issues they've had with influencers and clients, and it's the number 1 fear around influencers. And we take it very seriously. The technology allows us to pull streams down live, so the carousel disappears off their stream instantly. And we watch with a social network, the whole network, to make sure that illicit things aren't going on, like grooming, trafficking, larceny,
right?
But not profanity, because this is the rock and roll world of Twitch and live streaming, and that isn't going away. So that's the wrong brand. If that's the issue, is profanity, that's something that nobody can touch in the live stream space. But we're very, very, very on top of all the other items I mentioned.
Right.
I was actually going to say almost identical to what Ian said about the profanity, is that somebody, when we first started getting into this, I had somebody comment and say, "You realize you're getting into punk rock, right?" And so, this is the punk rock space. So you got to have brands that are willing to participate in that kind of landscape. And I think that's just something that we also have to recognize. This might not be for every brand.
Right. Oh, no, for sure. For sure. There are definitely different ways in and for everything. But to your point, you also just understand the medium that you're in. But, I think there are always ways, depending on the brand and how you want to activate, I think there's always ways in which you kind of carve out your niche. Because to your point, profanity is big, but also Animal Crossing, not much going on in that space. That is much more, laid back and very, very, very chill. So my next question is, so how do we actually buy the product? Is it CPM based? Is it CPE based? Is it a flat fee? Are there any licensing fees involved with the technology itself? How are teams, buying the product today?
So right now, we're doing direct sales, so it comes through me and my team, and basically we just have the typical media buying conversation, which is what's the budget, what's the timeline, what sort of impressions, what are your KPIs, and we go through it all, handhold it. We are, longer term, we are looking to programatize and make ourselves available on the desks because that would be a sensible next step. But we're not a digital product. We are and we are, right? So we're digital in that it's served on a digital live stream, but it's not clickable, which is why we need the QRs to activate activation on the second screen. So it's important that people understand that. It's I've had 2 calls this week with agencies that thought they got it and called me back the next day and say, yeah, I just figured out I'm not going to do the QR, I'm just going to drop in a link. I'm like, okay. So we have to start again, and we go through the process of explaining that you can't click into Twitch, right? Which is important. So for now, to me, it's CPM based. We're in the market for the rest of this year with the minimum $10,000 buy, heading to 25 next year, and we're looking to ramp up a little in terms of over delivery in the next quarter or 2, just to get people in that are interested. We're going to lavish you with some extra inventory as you do it, because we're just getting started.
So as you begin to whet our appetite with these opportunities, what does that 10K level get you in terms of minimum spend threshold?
So at 10K, we're at 250 CPM. So you're looking at about, a good sized buy. I mean, 10K with a little extra, you're probably going to get 15 million impressions on about 50 streams for about 750,000 people. That's a rough guide.
Yeah.
The carousel time spent is about 4 to 4.5 hours. Most people that spend time, so they see the ad between 35 and 42 times roughly. There is this thing at the beginning where people might bounce in and bounce out of streams for a minute. Okay, that's the one thing that we can't control at this time. But there are also people that we've seen them, and Zack was like, "How did they do that? 19 hours, right?" So that's the other end of the spectrum. But most people, once they settle on a stream and they're happy that it's an influence they like and they're in the journey, it's 4.5 hours spent.
Yeah, and one thing to add that I think is the second part of your question, Ryan, which is, is there a license fee associated with the technology? As we're taking this product to market, and because we really feel there's value with the activation, I mean, like I said, you could buy the impressions without the QR code and the activation, but we're bundling it in, and it's just included in the CPM. So there's no additional fee to have that second screen activation. Now, if you want to go and take that and use it omni-channel, so you want to embed it in packaging or put it on end caps at your grocery store, or maybe your QSR, and you want to have it on your order screen, you would have to pay for that media. We do also have brands that are coming in, vice versa, that are coming in for the omni-channel second screen product and then going ahead and buying some of the inventory. You can get started that way as well. But we're seeing actually because of the inventory and we're bundling it, and people are like, well, I might as well just go that direction because I'm going to get some eyeballs too. So that's how we've been putting it together for at least till the end of 2020.
Got it. And when it comes to building out a campaign timeline, is it 24-hour turnaround? Is it ideally maybe the 2 weeks? Like, what's that ideal timeline to get a project live once you start talking to an agency that approves the conversation?
Yeah. So if you have the campaign ready and it's just placement of a GIF into stream, it's about 24 to 48 hours, depending on how much targeting we need to do.
Okay.
So if you're a brand that says, I want no first-person shooter, that takes a little bit of time because we got to actually pull out some of the influencers who will focus on that. If it's across the board, I'll take anything. That's about 24 hours. If you do want to plug in one of the Thece, second screen mobile activations, that is where it could take a little bit more time because it needs to go through creative, and it's not time on our side. I would say it's more time on the agency side because they don't exactly know what they want. They don't necessarily know what the KPI they're driving towards, or what's
Right.
the best thing. Is it a product selector? Is it time on app? Is it so? There could be a little bit of a lag there, and it's a typical creative build lag.
Right.
But if you knew everything, you had all your assets in place. We have a very detailed sort of specifications document, and it's kind of a plug and play platform, except for that we realized we take the hard parts away from the agency, so it is somewhat turnkey. You guys are great at what you do, which is the creative and the content, and we just apply it towards our platform, and we do all the stuff that's not fun, like putting in the conditions and tying up the different conditional logics for the different things that are very specific to our platform.
Right. Got it. And I am curious, because you kind of brought up the different selectors, and I don't think we talked in detail about that second screen actual experience of what that looks like. I think we talked a lot about how it appears on Twitch and that kind of first entry into the experience, but once you're on that second screen experience, what can it be? And we haven't talked about this, right, everybody? I'm not going crazy. Half and half.
Yeah. I mean,
okay, all right, I'm going crazy then.
We talked about it. I mean, we said there's the usage of the question and answer, right?
Right.
So
The Q&A.
Yeah. So there's the Q&A. So quizzing, what's the 5 things that you know about Herman Miller chairs, right? Right. Quizzing. Then there's what we call the product selector, which is I've got a basket of products. I'm a consumer product company, and I'm Sensodyne, and I've got 10 different kinds of Sensodyne. What's the right Sensodyne for me? That's one that's used quite often. Mm-hmm. Then there's the persona mapping. That's the Oreo tool that we have up as our test, which is what kind of Oreo person am I? Mm-hmm. And then there's the one that Ian mentioned with the cachaça company, which is what's cachaça, and then what do I use it for?
Right.
And that one ends up with recipes of drinks that you can make. And so that's sort of the question and answer. The next use case that we're getting a lot of requests for, is I've created this 30-second ad that nobody watches. Mm-hmm. Can we trigger off of that Twitch stream to a mobile device by 30-second ad?
Right.
Yes.
Okay.
And on top of that, we can add in calls to action at the end of that ad by putting in our platform. So you just watched that ad. Are you thirsty? Buy some Sprite, right? Right. So we can actually make that 30-second ad actionable.
Mm-hmm. Got it. So we have right now there are 4 templates in place that are more plug and play, easy to go out there. You have a 5th one along the way that is very much media focused, trying to drive extra additional eyeballs to a video spot, a display spot, whatever it might be. But when it comes to just customization, can we build anything? I mean, in theory, essentially.
Yeah. I was gonna say then the third bucket is down the road, and it's not in a long period of time, but shortly. If you have a web app, so it can't point to if it points to a native app, we're just gonna point to the app store, right?
Right.
But if you have a web app, let's say you have a 3D WebGL app that you built and you're really proud of it, and you want to point people to it, let's do it. Let's go right now.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So there's nothing wrong with any of that.
Okay. Yeah. Good to know.
So I just want to steer our attention to one of the questions that we got in from chat. We got a question here from Knights of G. They want to know, are these in compliance with the terms of services of the games that you're surrounding as well? Because certain publishers have strict terms in terms of their games and what is promoted.
I would have to say that the way that this kind of goes into the order. So it's really up to the influencer. So when an order comes in, actually the very first step, this is why it's not instantaneous. So this is why we can't pretty much put it onto a programmatic desk right now.
Right.
Is that if an order comes in, the first person's responsibility for display is the influencer. Mm-hmm. And so the influencer gets this alert to them that says, hey, you got this new advertiser who wants to be inside your carousel. Can you accept it, yes or no?
Right.
So that's the first action that happens. And it happens for a couple reasons. One is compliance. But 2, there's also a lot of influencers, and particularly once you start getting into the celebrity influencers who already have existing exclusive brand agreements.
Right.
Well, particularly if you're talking about in the endemic space, you know, a lot of these influencers have signed an exclusive deal with a chair company. And so when if a peripherals company comes in and says, hey, we've got this awesome ad that's going to run, we might get a lot of opt-outs because so many people already have exclusives with it. Or there's influencers who, you know, are playing games that have restricted participation, and, you know, so it's up to them that they have to opt out of that.
Got it. That makes sense. Chat. Thanks for the good question. Well, Ryan, I got more questions I can keep asking, but do you have anything on your end that you want to dive into?
I just got the last one, so go ahead.
Oh, okay.
It's back and forth. Tennis volley. Come on, man.
Yeah. Serve returned. Okay. And then, so when it comes to, I guess, who do you use as your competition in the market? Because I don't really think I've seen a solution out there that is doing what you're doing right now. So I'm just curious because, again, as our brand's asked, is like kind of who's your competition, like who are you competing against, and really, I think what this question boils down to is what is that unique value proposition, that differentiator that is your your key selling point for the product.
Ian, you want to take this one?
Yeah, I honestly think we're kind of first to market with this aggregation of influencers and media formats. We get a fair share of pushback from people in the gaming community that they want us to do things that are in the game. So they want to see Kellogg's cornflakes in the bowl when someone pulls them, and they want to see something and go past the window with the T-Mobile sign or something like that. You know, it's like, and there's a place for that, and I don't see any reason why that can't happen or won't happen as things go on. And there's obviously Twitch's own pre-roll, which runs before just about every VOD I have to watch. So there's that. But in the media space, in-stream, so far we haven't found anything else. And you know, they say you should be first, be better, or cheat, and we don't like to cheat, so we're first, and I'm sure we'll be joined soon.
No, that's great.
And I mean, like, I answer on the second screen component of it too, you know, which is the omnichannel. There's a lot of competitors in that space. I mean, there's a lot of people that are, particularly with what's happened with COVID, you're seeing the QR renaissance, right? And so there's other, you know, I'd say agencies more than tech companies that are coming out with QR-enabled creative. And so, you know, in that respect, I think the thing that we've done is that we've narrowed in on not trying to create the next great QR platform, but we've narrowed in on what happens when you scan it, and can I keep your attention? And so I'd say, you know, from a competitive landscape in that space, we've been at this for over 5 years.
Right.
And we've only added in things that increase engagement, not decrease it. And we've actually stripped stuff out of our platform that were barriers, where it stopped people from participating. So.
Right. Well, so I'm curious. So, what are some of those best practices or things that you're doing to encourage people to scan? Are there, shout outs from the streamer, like them, from the streamer themselves? Is it like things in chat? Is it, blocking the carousel units? So maybe you have like 1, 2, 3. So it's like, hey, get ready, get set, scan. Like, what are some, best practices or things that you're doing to kind of increase that engagement?
I mean, I'd say at this moment, like we're at the moment where we're figuring that out. What we know are some worst practices.
Oh, all right. Gotta start somewhere.
The worst practice is throwing up a QR code with zero context.
Mm-hmm.
And this we actually learned because part of our business, prior to, just going all guns blazing at the esports space, was we were doing a lot of virtual events, a lot of virtual conferences, and we were a part of broadcasts of several of them. And if an MC shouts it out, everybody plays. Mm-hmm. If you put up a QR code with no context around it whatsoever, nobody plays. Mm-hmm. And so, somewhere, we're starting to figure out somewhere in between. So that's where we started being like, wait a second, we've got these restrictions in broadcast of what we can do. Basically, we can't put HTML5 in there. We can't put videos in there. But what we can do is we can put the GIF in there. And so, that's something that we have. Again, we always try to solve our own problems, and then we apply that to like, okay, maybe this is the best practice.
Right.
And so when we did that, we saw this increase. So then the other thing too is like the first time we did it was vote for MVP. That's all it said, and it had the MVP logo up. Well, that didn't give enough people enough time to say like, wait a second, like I want this to be a part of it. So like if you see the one that's running right now, that's in the carousel, and it's the one that's pointing to us. That one, it says, it staggers you into why you should care. So I'm talking to you as the audience member, and you might not care. You might not be brand side. You might be a gamer.
Yep.
And you might say, well, you know what? This isn't for me. So you'd never scan. But if you are on the brand side and you're trying to figure out how to, you're like, oh, that's me. They're calling me out.
Yep.
So, we don't have the perfect answer yet. Like I said, we're still fiddling with holding the QR code 15 seconds, 10 seconds. So, like I said, worst practices, yes. Best practices.
Well, hey, what not to do is definitely a good start. Yeah. So.
But yeah. Sorry, Ryan, carry on.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say I wanted to, before we dive into the final 4 questions here, I wanted to surface one more that we got in from the Twitch chat. So from user iTwitch, they want to know, do you have a laundry list of influencers from who we can cherry pick which ones we'd want the media buy shown within? Or is it just genre?
You take it.
So, yeah, I was going to say, so we have some celebrity influencers and streamers. But what we actually focus on right now are actually the mid-tier. And the reason is because we get a lot less opt-outs, number one. Number two, and this kind of goes back, I didn't actually answer some of Scott's previous questions, so I'll get to it now. And number two, there's better engagement with the fans in the mid-tier. And so some of those things that you talked about, like, do you get shout-outs? Well, if you're just being a part of the rotation, you're paying $2.50 CPM, no, you do not get a shout-out a part of your purchase with the influencer. That's up like $50, $60, $70 CPM for you to say, oh, hey, look, everybody, we want to see the Oreo, come play. However, when you have a highly engaged audience, they ask. Right. And so if you go look at our website right now in our esports page, you'll see some content from one of our streamers, which is named Zack, where she just finished playing her game, and somebody asked her, why does this Oreo thing keep spinning in your lower left corner? She's like, I don't know, let's go play, right? And she actually played, and she thought it was cool, and she went through the whole thing. And that's what you get in the mid-tier. You don't necessarily get that at the upper end. If you want one of the really big names to do that, it's not gonna be because one of their fans asked them.
Right.
And to your point about those, go ahead.
I would add, so that we might down the road get to a point where there's whitelists and blacklists, and I hate the expression whitelist, blacklist, but let's just call it that for now because everyone knows what I'm saying. Blacklist is when we pull people down and they can't get back in. Okay, so someone has an issue and we have to pull them down. That goes into our blacklist file and they never see the light of day again. And I do think that there may be a time when we get to the other side of that coin and people say, I want to choose from this 20,000. But the whole point of aggregation is it flattens it out and gives you really good access to all sorts of gamers and esports players and influencers in real time while they're doing what they love. And that's a benefit, it's not a step back, I don't think. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, for sure. And one thing I will say about that tier 2 level of influencers is that we start to see a lot more deduplicated audiences amongst them. So, Dr. Lupo, Tim the Tapman, while they're great in terms of getting a huge draw, same people are tuning into those streams every day, and same people are tuning in across to those streams every day. So to your point, Zach, earlier, the more engaged fans are definitely living amongst that tier 2 audience.
Yeah, and something else that we're in sort of, I would call it alpha mode right now, and we've done some early testing with some of our partners out of the UK, is actually doing more of the direct shout-out and direct call-ins inside of competitions, like esport contests. So the swiping and questions on the second screen activation are not about the brand. They're actually about what you're watching. So who's going to win? Vote for MVP. I mentioned that earlier. All brought to you, underwritten by a brand. So Reese's can be the, who's going to be the MVP of this League of Legends tournament, brought to you by, Reese's. But the content is about the people playing the game, like who you're watching. It's kind of like the NHL 3 stars concept, except for chosen by the audience. So we did some early testing, actually 2 weeks ago, on a private tournament. We got 50% of the audience to participate. So I mean, those things, those like mentioned, called out activations, definitely are higher participation, but they come with higher costs. Because as Ryan knows from setting up a bespoke carousel for a single broadcast is a little bit more work than probably we all thought would be.
It's funny how those things work out. And I want to just transition us here into the final 4 questions of the stream. So these are the 4 questions that we get asked by all of our media teams whenever we bring a new partner in for a recommendation, and they are as follows. And we keep it super quick, high level here. So to start off, what does it cost? What are those minimums to get involved?
So 10 grand minimums right now, 250 CPM. That's to the end of the year. Then 25 going after Gen 1.
Fantastic. Next up, what is your scale? So what is the size? How many gamers or influencers or eyeballs are we reaching?
We can go as far as 100,000. Obviously, that would just give you too many. So unless you're going to buy our entire inventory pool up, we have 1 billion impressions a week. So we have more than enough. We can suit every need from 10K to 1 million.
Fantastic. What is the lead time? How long for an activation here?
We can turn ourselves around in 48 hours. Normally, creative takes longer. But if you have creative ready to go in the right sizes, we can get you plugged in really quickly. The back end was designed for that.
Fantastic. Then lastly, why you versus a competitor?
Because we're the only game in town.
Yeah.
Well, that's great.
Because you can go for a sponsorship, and we'd love for you to give it a try, but we want you to become a repeat recurring customer.
Absolutely. Fantastic. Well, I would say, Ryan, do you want to bring this stream home? I think I got one last thing to say, besides thank you to both of these gentlemen for joining us on this Thursday afternoon. Subscribe to our podcast, Floor 9. We won an award this week, and we're telling the world. So if you haven't already subscribed, take a listen. It's just another way to get your fix on everything that's going on in the media, marketing, and advertising landscape. But Ryan, let's get on out of here.
Yeah, well, aside from that, Scott, thanks for being here as always. And Zack, Ian, really appreciate the insight, and most of all, appreciate your time. Really thankful for the conversation, and most of all, thanks to the viewers for being here as always. Until next time.
All right. Bye, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.